The Serpent Column, also known as the Serpentine Column, Delphi tripod, or Plataean tripod, is an ancient bronze column at the Hippodrome of Constantinople in what is now Istanbul, Turkey. It is part of an ancient Greek sacrificial tripod, originally in Delphi and relocated to Constantinople by Constantine I the Great in 324. It was built to commemorate the Greeks who fought and defeated the Persian Empire at the Battle of Plataea. The serpent heads of the 8-meter-high column remained intact until the end of the 17th century. History. Provenance. The Serpentine Column has one of the longest literary histories of any object surviving from Greek and Roman antiquity. Its provenance is not in doubt, and it is at least 2,492 years old. Together with its original golden tripod and bowl, it constituted a trophy, or offering, dedicated to Apollo at Delphi. This offering was made in the spring of 478 BC, several months after the defeat of the Persian army in the Battle of Plataea by those Greek city-states in alliance against the Persian invasion of mainland Greece. Among the writers who allude to the column in the ancient literature are Herodotus, Thucydides, Demosthenes, Diodorus Siculus, Pausanias, the Traveller, Cornelius Nepos, and Plutarch. The removal of the column by the Emperor Constantine to his new capital, Constantinople, is described by Edward Gibbon, citing the testimony of the Byzantine historians Zosimus, Eusebius, Socrates, and Sisomenus. Battle of Plataea. The invasion, a combined land and sea expedition, which began in 480 BC, fell under the command of the king himself, Xerxes I of Persia, and his brother-in-law and cousin Mardonius, who had been a close confidant of Xerxes' father, Darius I of Persia. Mardonius had led the first invasion into Greece 10 years earlier, but ultimately was wounded and subsequently called back by Darius. Mardonius was replaced by Datus and Artaphernes, who after initial success were decisively beaten at the hands of the Athenians in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. Mardonius eventually persuaded Darius to mount a second invasion. It had twin objectives, the first of which was forcing the submission of those city-states on mainland Greece who had refused to provide the symbolic tribute of earth and water to the Persian king. The second objective was to punish the cities which had supported the Ionian Greeks who, under the leadership of Aristagoras of Miletus, revolted against Persian rule in 499 BC. The Athenians had sent 20 triremes in support of the revolt, and the Eretrians sent 5. This struggle lasted until the defeat of the Ionians in a naval battle outside Miletus in 494 BC. The Battle of Plataea followed the two simultaneous defeats of the Greeks at the Battle of Thermopylae, and the Battle of Artemisium. At Artemisium in August 480 BC, the storm-buffeted Persians confronted the much smaller fleet of Greek naval forces, who retreated to Salamis. After several indecisive clashes over at least 3 days, and the news of the defeat on land, the strategy of the Greek allies was in ruins. Nothing could prevent the Persian advance and ultimately, the occupation and pillage of Athens. Only the brilliant strategy, planning and careful reasoned actions of the Athenian general Themistocles restored the situation. He arranged to evacuate the inhabitants of Athens before the invasion to the island of Salamis. Then he persuaded the reluctant Peloponnesian cities to stop and fight a naval battle in the Straits of Salamis, rather than retreat to the isthmus, thus drawing Xerxes in to attack the Greek fleet in the straits. After Salamis, Xerxes withdrew to Sardis, but left a land force in Thrace, under the generalship of the experienced campaigner, Mardonius. He repossessed Athens in the spring of 479 BC, and after the failure of diplomacy conducted by Alexander of Macedon on behalf of the Persians, to persuade the Athenians to a separate peace, the war continued. On learning that a Spartan force was on the march from the Peloponnese, Mardonius set fire to Athens again and removed his force to a strategic position in Boeotia, north of the river Asopus. The Greeks, under the leadership of Pausanias, regent of Sparta, drew up on high ground in defensive positions south of the river Asopus and above the plain of Plataea. After days of skirmishing and changes of position on the Greek side, Mardonius launched a full attack. The result of the complex battle was complete victory for the Spartans, under the leadership of Pausanias. Mardonius was killed and the Persians fled in confusion, led by Artabazush, the Persian second in command. The significance of the Battle of Plataea. The Greek victories at Plataea and contemporaneous naval battle at Mycale, though they did not end the war, had the result that never again would the Persian Empire launch an attack on mainland Greece. Afterwards, Persia pursued its policies by diplomacy, bribery and cajolement, playing one city-state against another. But, by these victories, and through the Delian League, Athens was able to consolidate its power in the flowering of Athenian democracy in 5th century Athens, under the leadership of Pericles, son of Xanthippus. After the Battle of Plataea, the last battle of the Greco-Persian Wars, Greeks built a bronze column of 3 intertwined snakes, whose bodies formed the column, to commemorate the 31 Greek city-states that participated in the battle. According to Herodotus, the bronze column was built using the bronze from the melted-down Persian weapons. A golden tripod was also built using the Persian weapons, and the whole monument was dedicated to the god Apollo and was placed next to the altar of Apollo at Delphi. It was placed on top of a stone base, an inverted Byzantine capital. In ancient writers, after describing the Greek victory at Plataea, in 479 BC, Herodotus recounts the collection of rich spoils by the Helots, who had taken part in the battle, and then records the decision to dedicate an offering to Apollo at Delphi. Having brought all the loot together, they set apart a tithe for the god of Delphi. From this was made and dedicated that tripod which rests upon the bronze 3-headed serpent, nearest to the altar. Herodotus Histories 981.1. In the same chapter, Herodotus records that dedications were also made to Zeus at Olympia and to Poseidon at the Isthmus. It is significant that precedence was given to Apollo at Delphi, despite the ambiguities in the responses of the Delphic oracle about the outcome of the invasion, and a suspicion that Delphi was sympathetic to the Persians. Thucydides and Demosthenes. An insight into the political squabbles of the victorious Greeks over this monument is given in the following passages. Full of arrogance over his victory at Plataea and the subsequent ease with which he punished the Theban leaders for their support of the Persians, Pausanias ordered a dedication on the column ascribing victory to himself alone. Subsequent events revealed his overweening ambition. He was in negotiation with the Persians and the Helots of Sparta to stage a rebellion, and set himself up as tyrant, with Persian support. Although his treachery was, at first, disbelieved in Sparta, it was eventually discovered by the ephors at Sparta through his personal slave, and he was killed. Thucydides describes the suspicions of the Spartans that Pausanias, the commander-in-chief of the Greek forces at Plataea, was on the point of treason and going over to the Persians. Citing the affair of the Serpentine Column as a ground for such suspicion, Pausanias provided many grounds for suspicion by his disregard of the laws, his admiration of the barbarians, and his dissatisfaction with things as they were. They examined the rest of his behavior to see if he had in any way departed from established norms. They then remembered that in the matter of the tripod at Delphi, which the Greeks set up from the first fruits of the victory over the Persians, he had thought fit, on his own account, to have a diptych engraved upon it. Pausanias, commander-in-chief of the Greeks, when he had destroyed the army of the Medes, dedicated this memorial to Phoebus. At the time, the Lacedaemonians at once deleted the diptych from this tripod and engraved the names of the cities who had joined together against the barbarian and set up the offering. Demosthenes gives a significantly different account of the train of events. In a speech against Nera, the orator recalls the conduct of Pausanias after the defeat of the Persians in the Battle of Plataea over the Serpentine Column. Pausanias, king of the Lacedaemonians, caused a diptych to be inscribed on the tripod at Delphi, which those Greeks who had fought as allies in the Battle of Plataea and in the naval engagement at Salamis had together made from the spoils taken from the barbarians, and had set up in honor of Apollo as a memorial to their bravery, as follows. Pausanias, commander-in-chief of the Greeks, when he had destroyed the army of the Medes, dedicated this memorial to Phoebus, as if the work and the offering were his alone, and not from the allies together. The Greeks were enraged, and the Plataeans obtained leave to bring a suit, on behalf of the allies, against the Lacedaemonians for 1,000 talents at the Amphictyonic Council, and they compelled the Lacedaemonians to erase the inscription and inscribe the names of those cities which had shared in the work. The orator goes on to argue that this action rankled with the Lacedaemonians and was a strong motive 50 years later. Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, says that a couplet composed by the poet Simonides replaced Pausanias' unlawful personal dedication. The saviors of Greece at large dedicated this, having delivered the cities from wretched servitude. Pausanias the traveller in the 2nd century AD, Pausanias, the travel writer, noticed the monument at Delphi. The Greeks together, from the spoils taken at the Battle of Plataea, dedicated her gold tripod set on a bronze serpent. The bronze part of the offering was preserved there, even at my time. But the Phocian leaders did not leave the gold in place in the same way. The Phocian general, Philomelus, took the treasures in 345 quarters BC to pay for mercenaries in the Third Sacred War, an act of extreme sacrilege, which resulted in the expulsion of Phocians from the Amphictyonic League by Philip II of Macedon, and a fine of 400 talents. Even at the time of Pausanias' visit, the sacred way, leading up to the Temple of Apollo, was lined on both sides with monuments, statues and treasuries commemorating important events in Greek history. Closest to the altar, as Herodotus says, was the Serpentine Column, the base of which has been found, as has the base of the altar, which was dedicated by the Chians, and Appendix A. Above these loomed the great bronze statue of Apollo, and, on the architrave of the temple, shields commemorating a Greek victory over the Gauls. Pausanias also identified the offering to Zeus at Olympia, paragraph above, and listed the names of the cities engraved upon it. In Gibbon, in his History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon refers to the Serpentine Column both in Chapter 17 and in Chapter 68. The circus or hippodrome was a stately building about 400 paces in length and 100 in breadth. The space between the two meta or goals was filled with statues and obelisks, and we may still remark a very singular fragment of antiquity. The bodies of 3 serpents twisted into one pillar of brass. Their triple heads had once supported the golden tripod which, after the defeat of Xerxes, was consecrated in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi by the victorious Greeks. And again, from the first hour of the memorable 29th of May, disorder and rapine prevailed in Constantinople, till the 8th hour of the same day, when the Sultan himself passed in triumph through the gate of St. Romanus. He was attended by his viziers, bashaws, and guards, each of whom was as robust as Hercules, dexterous as Apollo, and equal in battle to any 10 of the race of ordinary mortals. The conqueror gazed in satisfaction and wonder on the strange though splendid appearance of the domes and palaces, so dissimilar from the style of Oriental architecture. In the hippodrome, his eye was attracted by the twisted column of the 3 serpents, and, as a trial of his strength, he shattered with his iron mace or battle-axe the underjaw of one of these monsters, which in the eyes of the Turks were the idols or talismans of the city. In other sources, the somewhat checkered history of the monument, after its removal to Constantinople, may be gathered from various sources. According to W. Howard J. Wells, it was converted into a triple-mouthed fountain by a later emperor, was seen and described by travelers from 1422 onwards, and was thrown down in 1700, when the serpents' heads were broken off. Marcus N. Todd says the level of the ground was raised in 1630, and the inscribed portion of the monument was then hidden. The base of the column was excavated in 1855, under the supervision of Charles Thomas Newton. 15 of the serpent's coils had been hidden, and the inscription, beginning at the 13th coil and ending at the 3rd, was revealed. It was deciphered by C. Frick in 1856, by Ernst Fabricius in 1886, and by others since. The 13th coil carries the laconic inscription, "Those who fought the war," followed on coils 12 to 3 by the names of 31 city-states. This contains 8 cities not named in Herodotus, Book 9.28, as being present at the Battle of Plataea, and excludes Pale, in Cephalonia, whom Herodotus did include. Pausanias, paragraph above, lists the names on the offering to Zeus at Olympus, which exclude 4 cities inscribed on the Serpentine column. Perhaps this is a simple oversight by a copyist. Although the cities inscribed on the column exclude other cities mentioned by Herodotus as participating in the war, it is clear that the memorial relates to the Great Persian War as a whole, not just the Battle of Plataea. The lists of states given by the 3 sources are set out in Appendix B. Coils 12 and 13 have been scarred and dented by saber cuts, which made the inscriptions difficult to decipher. The dedication, said by Diodorus to have been composed by Simonides, paragraph above, has not been found. One of the serpent heads survives in the Museum of Antiquities, Istanbul. This head has its underjaw missing. A linkage to Edward Gibbon's colourful description of the conqueror's triumphal entry into Constantinople on the 29th of May 1453. Current status. Pausanias informs us that roughly 100 years later, the Phocians used the golden tripod to fund their military during the Holy War involving the Oracle of Delphi. Constantine the Great moved the Serpent Column to Constantinople to decorate the spina of the Hippodrome of Constantinople, where it still stands today. The top of the column was adorned with a golden bowl supported by 3 serpent heads. The bowl was destroyed or stolen during the Fourth Crusade. Many Ottoman miniatures show the serpent heads were intact in the early decades following the Turkish conquest of the city. He states that it is a hollow bronze of intertwined snakes, 3-headed, a talisman for the citizens against snake bites. Between 50 and 100 years after the Turkish conquest of Constantinople, the jaw of one of the 3 serpent heads was documented missing. The accepted version states that Mehmed II shattered it upon entering the city in triumph as its conqueror. Later, at the end of the 17th century, all 3 of the serpent heads were destroyed. Again, although there is legend that a drunken Polish nobleman knocked them off. Nusret name by Siladar Findaklili Mehmed Aga relates that the heads simply fell off on the night of October 20, 1700. The upper jaw of one of the heads is on display at the Istanbul Archaeology Museum.